Welcome to Monster Monday. So today we're going to take on the movie Altitude. Now this was sent to me by a subscriber named Caleb Vila. I had seen this movie before, but my expectations were high for it because of the trailer I saw years ago. This is why I don't watch trailers anymore, and I didn't really care for the movie. Having now rewatched it, I honestly can say that I really did enjoy it. And I think that a big reason is because of the intention behind the film, not so much the execution. Now, while I do think that the execution of the film is good, I do not think it is excellent. And I do think that it could have been, because I do really like the concept of the movie. It just doesn't land in a lot of the areas where it could have landed harder. And I guess that's a tad ironic since this is a movie about a plane that can't land. So this is a movie about a plane that can't seem to land its intentions either. But as I said, I think that if you take the story as a whole, and once everything wraps up and you kind of see the twist, which you see coming from a mile away, but the way that it's done and the events that actually take place before, during, and after, I feel like wraps up into a really beautiful story. And you could take those things and you could look at them and break them down metaphorically and like the subtext and all that. And I thought that actually, thinking about the story as a whole, actually made me appreciate the film a whole lot more. But let's talk about the movie. So now this is a pretty heavily inspired by H.P. Lovecraft type of a story, and I know that that is exciting for a lot of my friends. I have a few friends that are really big H.P. Lovecraft fans, and anytime anything associated with Lovecraft comes out, they're all about it. And I thought that the way that the monster was handled in this, and the concept behind like this storm they fly in, you can't see anything, there's no freaking ground, there's no sky, of course there's it reminds me of course of the Langoliers. I think that that would be something comparative to this film. Obviously a much different outcome and a much different story, but there are elements that are taken from the Langoliers, absolutely. And the monster itself, once revealed, although it not being revealed much, and that would absolutely need to be the case with this movie, because once the creature is seen, it's seen, and that would be that. So they really did have to tease it, and then show it one last time right before the climax of the film, or during the climax rather. And so when the monster is fully revealed at the end, I really enjoyed the design. Now it's kind of textbook Lovecraftian, so there's really no extra points for creativity per se, but regardless, I feel like they did land the look and the aesthetic of a Lovecraftian monster as we know it. So there is a lot to like about this movie. Something I really don't like about this movie is this jock character, the obligatory cunt, as I always used to say. Rest in peace, Dylan Clancy. He always used to love that phrase. But yeah, he's the obligatory cunt in this movie, and you just want to beat this guy senseless. Now, does that mean that the actor is bad? Does that mean the character isn't? No, it means that the guy is doing his job. He's meant to be the guy you hate. It's when the character you're supposed to like is the character you hate that is when you run into the problem. Or even when the villainous character, or a character that you're not supposed to like all that much, is more annoyingly grating on your nerves versus like actually being able to land the role that he's given. There's perfect examples of that throughout film. You can find characters where you're just like, oh no, I get that I'm not supposed to like him, but it's a whole different kind of dislike. No, it's because I really don't like the actor. I really don't like the performance here, that he's not working for me. But this guy, I'm not going to say he does like an amazing performance or is anything, but he plays his role well. You very much hate this guy, and they do try to give him some depth, I guess, so to speak, but Not really all that much. And oh man, I mean, they just start him off. They start him off with as a character you just instantly want to hate. You know, you got a mechanic that's working on the plane and he has brown skin, so he calls him Bin Laden and then chases him off. And it's like, oh my God, I already hate you. You're horrible. The way he treats his girlfriend, the way he grabs this guy's comic book and tears it up. Here's the thing. Not only would I punch this guy in the face, I don't care if he was 10 times my size, if he grabbed my comic book and tore it up in front of me, but how are the friends not all over his ass about this? The main girl here, she should have been like, I just bought that for him. What the fuck? Like, she does push back against him, and maybe they're just used to his bullshit. But whoa, I can't believe how calm people are about that. She bought him this gift, and he grabs it almost instantly and tears it up, accusing this guy of being 7 years old and that he's going to beat his ass if he tries to get this comic book back from him. And then, of course, there's the added annoyance of something that I have always talked about as a ridiculous double standard in our society, in the United States anyways. I always forget that I have subscribers from all around the world, so this is a United States problem that I'm aware of because of the country that I live in. So if this is a problem where you're at as well and you can relate, then cool. If not, then, you know, here you go. But one thing that I've never been able to understand is this double standard of, you know, comic books and geeky, like what's considered geeky comic books and video games and, you know, superhero stuff, like movies and film in general and all that. Like, this is all geeky shit. And then, you know, if you go over to a guy's house and he's got like sports memorabilia everywhere and he plays fantasy football with his friends and he wears the jersey during his you know, sporting events that he's watching, whether he's watching football or baseball or basketball or whatever, he sits there and he screams at the television and he really cares about it. Now, I'm not knocking this because I used to be really into sports. I was a hardcore sports fanatic for many years of my life, but I gave it up because of my own personal reasons. I'm not going to get into that right now. It's not like I'm like, oh my God, it's private, you can't. No, it's nothing like it. It's just a waste of time to talk about. But I've just never understood the double standard. It irritates the shit out of me. And of course, this is because we live in essence, when it really comes down to it, we're still very primitive. And so the Neanderthal man, you know, the tough guys in school kind of made the rules when it started. It was like, sports good, comics bad, and if you say anything, I'll beat you up. Because before intellect actually comes into play, when you're still childish, you know, brute strength and threats of violence kind of rule everything. And while that still is probably the most dominating factor of our human species, no matter what age you are, it starts to even out a little bit. I feel like fear is always, you know, the main proponent of everything, whether it be politics or whatever, what have you. But when you're a kid especially, it's just like people are cool because, you know, they can beat you up. And it doesn't really matter. Because in this movie, there's an example of this about how, you know, this her boyfriend in the movie. I haven't even really talked about the characters, but the boyfriend in the movie, and this is something that irritates me because I know that this is real. I remember I was in high school. Being cool, or being smart is thought of as lame and not cool. And that shit baffles me. And I don't think that was always a thing. I think that became a thing later on, because I think that when you're in school, because school's for education, the smartest kids should be the coolest kids. That would make sense. But it's usually the exact opposite. It's usually the biggest idiots in the school. It's a place for education, and the people that are held in the highest regard in the school when it comes to the students are the dumbest kids in the school who just so happen to be able to beat people up, and the smartest kids in the school who are held in high regards by the teachers are held in such low regards. Now, there are some people who like the smart kids, and there will be people in the comments who are like, oh, I always hung out with the smart kids, and I love geeky guys, and this and that. They exist, and I'm not saying that they don't, but the overall consensus, I mean, and I hate to try to, compare movies to real life as an actual example, but it is a stigma. It is something that follows. Movies do follow a sort of truth of how we are as a society, and one of the constants, if you watch any movie that pertains to high school, it is the jocks, it is the fucking, the big tough kids that rule the school and are thought of as hip and cool, and it's the dorky smart kids that are thought of as dorky and smart. Like, I even called them dorky when they shouldn't be, but they are. Like, they're socially inept in a way. Not all of them, but a lot of them are, and it's frustrating to watch. Like, in this movie, they're going around and they're saying things, and he says something very intelligent, and everyone's like, fucking idiot. He's an idiot for being smart. Come on. Anyway, okay. Obviously, I get triggered by that, but I do. It fucking frustrates me. So anybody who's like, oh, sports are awesome, you walk into a guy wears a football jersey for a team he's never played on to watch a sport that he's either never played in or barely ever played in, and that's thought of as totally normal behavior. But if a guy wears a Star Wars shirt to a Star Wars movie, he's a fucking geek. Explain that one to me. I just won't ever get that. I will never get that to save my life. Anyway, all right. When he tore up his comic, I got really like, oh man, I want to fucking just grab this guy and just choke him out. Anyway, all right. So they fly into this black cloud, which is where I feel like the movie. At that point, it's kind of just like pretty faces and obvious drama that you've seen a million times. But then once they fly into the black cloud and her tail rudder gets stuck in position and they're just kind of flying upwards, and then they start dealing with the problems that would occur if you started to slowly keep ascending. Oxygen would get thinner and thinner until you couldn't breathe. Stuff like that. Ice starts to build up on the wings. And then, obviously they realize like there is no ground. There is nothing out there. They can't get a hold of anybody. This movie very much resembles something like The Langoliers. I think that's where it drew heavy inspiration from, and because it is a Lovecraftian movie that I feel like, any Lovecraftian movie, In the Mouth of Madness or any of that stuff, you're going to, of course, kind of compare this to those things. But I would probably take The Langoliers and say it's the main influence of this movie. Although, being pretty different. And I do like the glimpses, as I had said. Like, I like that the monster's shown, but then it's just kind of quick flashes. You got to do that Jaws build up, and then finally you show the thing at the end, and it's badass. And you can see the twist coming from a mile away for sure, but the way it wraps up, I thought it was really cool. We'll get to that though here in a minute. So the dude has to go outside the plane and try to free up the rudder there, and he goes out. He just so happens to keep his climbing gear. Coincidentally enough, because he's like, I'm not getting rid of my stuff, although he has no problem with ditching everyone else's stuff. But he takes the rope and he rappels out and he starts kicking it. Could you imagine trying to do that? Could you imagine freaking opening up the door and going outside the plane on a rope and this guy catching him? Now, the jock idiot guy, he is holding on to him, and here's an idea. So clearly, I don't know if they're actually having an affair or not, but the cousin of our main character here, the guitarist guy, he is clearly in love with Jock Dude's girlfriend. and she's clearly into him as well. But I don't know if they're actually fucking or dating. He says something about this girl he likes or whatever, but she has a boyfriend. I don't know if that's like that there's an admittance of them, but I think they are. From what I could gather from what was going on, I think that they were fucking behind the scenes. I think she was cheating on him. And while I definitely don't condone cheating, I think that if you want to be with someone else, just be with someone else. You know, you don't have to leave. It is as easy as that. Of course, there's those relationships where the guy is going to physically assault you if you leave, or he's going to try to kill you or whatever. They're rarer, but you know, in that case, then you need to go to the police. You need to get out of that relationship. I don't give a shit. You've got to go. It is not worth staying in a relationship with someone that you don't trust, that you don't love, that you have no interest in, any of that stuff. So she wants to be with this guy. She's screwing him behind his back, which is not the right thing to be doing, of course, but I completely understand why she's doing it, because this guy is dreadful. But here's the thing. If you are going to depend on a guy holding a rope that has your life at the other end of it, you probably don't want to kiss his girlfriend right in front of him and make that the moment where you guys are coming out as a potential couple that you've been cheating, whatever. That's not the moment. I get it. Like, I get it. I get that she thinks he could die right then and fuck it all. Like, I need to kiss him. I need to tell him that I care about him. Like, this is that moment. But it's really not that moment. Like, it's a very selfish moment. And while he does hold on to her, or on him, sorry, he ultimately does cut him free. But I agree with his cutting him free, because they would have just both died. So when the girl attacks him, like, this rope wasn't broke, this rope was cut, he could have easily said right when he landed, look, you saw I was being pulled out of the plane. The thing was breaking. I had to cut myself free. Otherwise, we were both dead anyways. Now, of course, they both end up dying. But in that instance, he doesn't know that. And I agree with his decision there. Now, did what happened before affect it even a little bit? Maybe. But why die with him? That wouldn't make any sense. Like, it just don't. You wouldn't die with it. Either I live or we both die. That decision is pretty simple. I mean, unless it's like your kid or something, or your wife or whatever, and you don't want to live without them, then it's like, fuck it, we're going together, because if you die, I'm going to die inside anyway, so I might as well just die with you. But this is not someone he wants to die with, clearly. And why is she filming? That makes no sense. I don't even know why that's a thing in this movie. The whole idea of her filming a lot of this stuff, it's not a found footage movie. So why is she constantly filming shit? I get it. She's the film major, but she would be filming when this guy goes outside the plane. I mean, yeah, if this was social media time, she'd be like, check this shit out, guys. Like, that would get a lot of hits for sure. But her filming it in that moment seems extremely not only inappropriate, but uncharacteristic of anybody. No one would think to grab a camera in that moment and be like, oh my God, he's gonna go out on the wing. Although nowadays, I guess I'm wrong, because that is something that irritates the shit out of me, is when people show me videos and they're like, hey, look at this, isn't this crazy? Look at this piece of shit. And you'll see someone who's beating their kid, or someone who's being attacked, or whatever, being beat up usually is what it is. And they're like, how could this guy do that? How could this guy do it? And I'm sitting there thinking, what the and I say this to the person if they're actually physically showing it to me. They're not just tagging me in a video. They're actually like have the phone in their hand and showing it to me. My first response will be like, well, why the fuck didn't this person who was filming put down the camera and help? Why is the camera even out? Like, he sees it, and his first reaction, or her first reaction, is to grab a camera. If you look at this shit, and it's funny because you'll see like fights going on in these videos. If you look, like, the cameraman will see, he'll catch in the footage, he'll catch everyone else around it, and they all have their phone out. That's their first instinct, is to grab their phone instead of get involved. Like, oh, better get this. Oh, somebody's going to want to see this. And technically they're right, because people are like, oh my god, 5 fucking million hits later, and they're like, oh, I'm famous, look at my channel. And it's like, yeah, you're famous for being an asshole. You're famous for being a pansy. Get the fuck in there and help these people. I would never think to pull out, like, if someone was getting attacked, if a parent was beating the shit out of their kid or something, it would never even cross my mind it literally would not cross my mind to grab my phone and catch it on fucking footage. Now, I could understand if someone's like, I want to get this on, she can't stop it one way or the other, but she's like, I need evidence so that this can be used against her later, whatever. Maybe that would be the case, but a lot of these are not that at all. These are just people who their instant reaction, boom. It's kind of like when you ask someone a question and they don't know the answer to it instantly, even though it is somewhere in their brain, and if they just thought for half a second, they would be able to conjure it up. But what do? They just instantly grab Google, boom, boom, boom. There's no necessity to retain anymore. Why bother? Why bother retaining it when you can just get the information, lickety-split? Why do we even have a brain anymore? Back when I was a kid, when you needed to get information, you had to work for it. And when you worked for it, you cared enough to remember, because you were like, I don't want to go through all that shit again. But with Google, why bother? Like, why bother remembering anything when I can Google it? That's why your brains don't work no more. All right, I don't know what the hell I'm going all over the place tonight. I'm even talking about the movie half the goddamn time. All right. I did like the drama, love the triangle between the people. I'm just saying, like, that's not the time to kiss the guy. And now there's a scene in this where it looks like the plane flies right into the monster's mouth, but then they all wake up and they're fine, and the ship's still flying and the monster's still outside. What was that? How is that? What the fuck? He opens his mouth and they fly right into it. So is that like, are they now inside the belly of a creature, and then what's inside of it is a smaller creature that is following them around? It looks like the same one. This is like some Qui-Gon Jinn, there's always a bigger fish kind of shit thing. Like, I don't understand what the fuck is happening. That's it. Like, she wakes up and she's like, oh, in a daze. And it's like, how were you knocked unconscious? The plane was jarred that much that you were thrown around. Did the plane like bank off the monster? Like, that scene made no sense at all. So I guess they can swallow you whole, and then you're just kind of deeper in the alternate dimension, like within his mouth is a second. Because in this movie, what they're doing, I don't even know, because he's controlling all of this. This is like the darkness that's been brewing inside of him, and it's something he's been able to create in his mind. How much effect he's been able to have? Is this only something he can do while he's flying, or really afraid? I almost said scared. I almost turned into a child right there. I almost turned into freaking like Danny Lloyd from The Shining. Yeah, scared. But yeah, maybe it was when he's like having his deepest, darkest fears, like flying or losing his girlfriend or whatever, that these kind of things come to fruition through his mind. Because I don't know what else he could do with his mind out there. The comic book, I liked the reveal that once he picks it up, what's happening in the comic is actually happening. This has been seen in many different movies. Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, whatnot. There's plenty of examples of this happening in the Mouth of Madness, of course. I like it. It isn't utilized all that much. I would have liked to see a little more. But in fairness, they could have just skipped to the end like they do in what I think. Yeah, they do that in like. Oh, well, I was gonna say Goosebumps, but no, they write the end of the book. But whatever. But yeah, I would have liked to see them kind of play more with that. But you don't get a lot of it, and that's what I was expecting when I saw the trailer back when it came out. And then. She goes and she kisses him and it clears everything up. And then he's like, wait, you didn't mean it. And then boom, it like goes back into darkness. And then she's like, in another attempt to try to get him to clear his mind, she makes him think of his parents, and which then pulls them back in time. And of course, the twist is that they're the plane that crashed into him. But this time, They don't crash. And there's a line earlier in the movie where he's telling her, we were meant to be together. I know it. And this is where you could start to break apart the meanings and all of that in the film. So they do, because of these events, end up together, or at least as children. I don't know if they actually work out or not. But for the moment, they do work out. They meet as kids and they instantly hold hands. Now, why would kids instantly hold hands if they never knew each other? That was odd. But is it because they retain some kind of... I have a bug down here and he keeps trying to cry. It was about bugs. I always have bugs. It seems like my freaking house is filled with bugs. It isn't. It's just I record out in the garage. But yeah, they're coming at each other, having been, having now he survived, and well, he always survived, but the parents survived and everybody, and they actually meet because she was meeting her mom that day, and he says, like, we were always meant to be together. Now, did he will that into existence? Did he then, because they're on the plane and we never see what happens to them. Do they just kind of cease to exist in that narrative because that now doesn't exist now that plane crash didn't happen? Because she would have a completely different life and so would he, and they were destined to meet at some point, and this is kind of a righting of the wrongs, and he kind of worked backwards and fixed what had happened, and they did end up together, and he just kind of knew that was to happen, or did he seek her out, and then once he met her, he fell in love with her, and then he made that happen? Or was this fated to happen? I don't know. It's interesting, but I do like the idea that they were always meant to be together, and that he has to go through all of these trials and tribulations and all of this, all these extreme actions here to get this actually to take place, and for them to be together like they originally were supposed to. The crash prevented them from being a couple, and he has to then go meet her as an adult, not knowing that they were actually going to be together later, but he has this feeling inside of him. Or is he kind of a stalker who's like, together forever or else, and he has that ability to manipulate things the way he sees fit, kind of like the kid in the Twilight Zone. He's going to send the people out into the cornfields if they don't pay it, listen to him. I don't know, but I do like to think about that kind of stuff. And as I said, I think as a whole, this film is actually pretty cool, and the tension that's going on in the film is pretty good. I enjoyed it. So you got two really hot chicks, you've got a cool concept, you've got an ending that leaves you thinking. So overall, I dug it, and I'm glad Caleb sent it, and I'm glad that I got to rewatch it, because my opinion on this has always been not good. But now I'll be like, no, man, I dug it. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are going to disagree with me on that, and that's okay. Second viewing is everything. Or should I say your last viewing? No matter what you think of a movie, when you watch it again, that's your true opinion on it. So my true opinion on it as it sits now, in the case I ever watch it again, for now, it's what you just heard. Maybe it'll be different in future viewings. Anyway, guys, all right, see you next week.